Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation podcast. I have Danny here with me and Sean in the background listening. Today, we will be talking about the recent news in Iran. What happened in Iran, Danny?
So basically, Iran has just bombed a US consulate, missile strike the US consulate in Iraq. And this was in reaction to Israel's killing of two of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is what they said this is for. But this is basically a continuation of the conflict between Iran and Israel in Syria. So to just start from the beginning here, initially there was a terrorist organization called Hezbollah, and that terrorist organization was attacking Iran in Iraq. I think it might have been in Syria. I'm not really sure where they initially started. So Iran was funding them. So Israel said, all right, enough of this. Let's get them. So they started attacking these weapon caches. That's Iran's been saying and killing, Hezbollah terrorists along with it. So this has escalated into direct conflict between Iran and Israel, with Israel sending missile strikes to them, and then also Iran using rebels and also direct strikes, as you can see in Iraq, against them as well. Now, I mean, Iran can't realistically bomb Israel because of the Iron Dome, so there's not really a huge risk there, at least the prominent areas of Israel. So there's a little bit of a stalemate, but it's very complicated to even get into this. Like, you think Ukraine and Russia is complicated? Well, this conflict probably has lasted around, I don't know, more than probably 1,000 years, and it stems from I think it's the conflict between the Shiites and another group, but basically it's the differences of religion between Judaism and Muslim. So great, another religious war that's been going on forever. This one's not really about religion, but it's tied to it. I mean, especially Hezbollah, for example, they are very religious crazies, like zealots. So one thing I want to mention is that the US is directly involved in this conflict, sending aid to Israel. We've been doing that since 2013 when it started. But it's definitely a little controversial when it comes to this, because here's my problem. All right. So it's one thing to be sending money to England or, France if they get attacked by some outside group, and we support them because they are a rational and on the main stage, they act decently. Like, they're not breaking war crimes every 2 seconds and being like a horrible nation, right? So that's one thing to consider when sending. You don't want to send supplies to North Korea, for example. Like, that just looks bad on the main stage. So when you talk about Israel, the state of Israel, there's definitely a lot of things that can come up that, very iffy and wishy-washy. But that's not the only part of this equation. We do similar things, and also in Syria and Yemen, with Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is another crazy actor that we also supply with weapons, defensive weapons. Sorry. So the big problem here, and the one thing I really want to discuss, is how America should go and deal with these kinds of foreign policy issues when it comes to a nation that doesn't really make us look very good. Israel's a very different story because we've been connecting them for a very long time. Maybe I'm talking about specifically renegotiating what we have agreed upon with Israel through the use of sanctions. But I'll get into that later. What do you think, Christian?
I mean, I always kind of questioned our unwavering support to Israel. I mean, I get it. They're a strategic area of importance. And I mean, it's just a country we've had close ties to for quite a long time. So I don't think that it's rational to say that just, cut them off.
Yeah.
And kind of their survivability is sort of reliant on us too. At least we play a big part. Obviously, their military is pretty advanced for that area. But you know that it's kind of hard for a nation like that when you're surrounded by all enemies, people that hate you. So I remember last year or 2 years ago, there was some kind of development with them making peace with like I think it was Qatar. Was it Qatar?
Not sure. I actually have to
Uh,
work with Qatar right now for work, but I'm not going to talk about that.
I believe it was during Trump's presidency. He kind of supposedly he played a part in that, in setting that up. And it was the United Arab Emirates. Israel and UAE kind of had a um, peace treaty sort of thing. And it was quite interesting because a lot of the Muslim world, especially, you know, like Iran, um, condemned the UAE for turning its back on its Islamic brothers, you know? So that's a big issue too, is, you know, when you get to Iran specifically is a very fundamentalist Islamic place. So, and I believe that like Sharia law is like actually the
Yeah.
law there. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's when it gets pretty crazy because I'm sure that people in Iran don't even agree with that. But there's, as always, the little guys don't really have much to do. It's the
Right.
government.
So one point I want to talk about here is Christian made a good point. You know, Israel and its state in entirety would pretty much be fucked if we didn't fund them. And you know, they are all like, it's not Israel's not a demon state like Saudi Arabia is. And I'm just going to straight up say Saudi Arabia is a demon state. They killed like 86 people. One of the largest mass executions in like the state's history just happened the other day, and they killed like human rights people. Like, I don't care. Fuck Saudi Arabia. Okay, Israel is redeemable. Okay. Um, and one thing I want to encourage that we use, and I think this is the best strategic way you can use sanctions. Okay, sanctioning Russia right now, all it's doing is making my oil more expensive. Just kidding, but it is, but that's besides the point. So sanctions can be a tool for coercion for our allies. So you might be questions like, why would we sanction our allies? Well, let's say America cared about, you know, morals. Say we really like, you actually took value in like good moral policy. Like say if we wanted to do something in South Africa, for example, when they were doing their apartheid. Well, right now, Human Rights Watch just literally labeled what's going on in Israel as an apartheid. So I have a question. What if we started putting on sanctions to Israel during a time where they are stressed after COVID, and now during a time where they've been now being attacked by a foreign nation, started putting tiny sanctions, not on everything, just started implementing sanctions. And we said to them, Israel, we want to see a change in your policy towards your citizens, and we don't want to see you do what you're doing to the people of Palestine. We want to see, you know, more of an open negotiations between all the citizens of your nation. Okay. And we slowly did this. And yeah, they're going to freaking fight us back for sure. They even might put sanctions on us. But you have to realize something. America is this big old cow that all other countries go suckle the teats off of. Okay. Israel needs us, whether they like it or not. So if we give them a situation, you know, that kind of like puts them at odds, and we say, guess what? You want more of this teat, baby? You want more of this teat? Well, you better go and do flips for us, because they're not giving out for free. So I'm saying that we should use sanctions as a tool to coerce these, you know, nations that are doing horrible humanitarian things into becoming good actors. And I think in the long run, they'll benefit Israel as a state, because as we've seen many, many, many times before, look at Russia right now, literally what happens when states become extremely super nationalist. Okay. And as what's happening in Israel right now. I mean, they're literally doing not ethnic cleansing when it comes to killing people, ethnic cleansing in the way of dislocating people from the main Israel lands and putting them into either an open air prison or like subjecting into like the nether regions of Israel. So, and I know this is definitely getting like a little off topic when it comes to this, but the reason why I'm mentioning is I think this the only thing America should be doing right now when it comes to, you know, Israel, because we give them so much money every year, you know, and that's consistently. I mean, you know, Afghanistan definitely beats it out, but at least Israel used their money well, and that's a good investment. You know, Afghanistan was a sunk cost. Israel can be a great state that we work with and ally with. I just think that, you know, we should use at least a little bit of coercive power to make them a better state. What do you think of this? Is that a moral argument to try to basically use economic sanctions to force moral rule of another nation?
I mean, hey, money is a way to get people to do things, or restricting that. Um, but I think morally, yeah, I agree. It's a good idea. Realistically, probably not going to happen. The
Oh
U.S. is,
no, this will
yeah,
not happen.
the U, the U.S.'s support of Israel is just kind of almost like a foregone conclusion, and without taking any time to amend certain things that maybe made sense 20 years ago but doesn't now.
You could thank the
uh,
evangelicals, by the way, for that one.
but I mean, let's hold on, I want to get on a tangent here, but these Judeo-Christian values, I hate that term because that's just not the same. We're not the same.
Yeah,
We may share part of the same book, but no. But I still think that, um I think that these people, Israelis, Palestinians, they could live in harmony, but there needs to be a, a gentle push, and
yeah.
not one that's going to be solved with violence and shooting missiles at each other. It's just not, that hasn't been working out. It's been a stalemate for quite a long time. I mean, Hamas can't do anything to Israel. Israel bombing innocent Palestinian people, then Palestinian people join Hamas because now they're mad, and it's just an unending cycle that I would figure someone would be wise enough to,
Do
figure it
something
out.
about.
But I mean, that's kind of the issue is Israel. And don't get me wrong, I love detracting from Israel, but what I mentioned before is because Israel's around a bunch of enemies, they have a lot of anxiety, and it's just they're paranoid. I think that that's a large part of the government's thing. Because
Yeah.
imagine like you trust them, you trust like a certain country, and then some crazy shit happens, and
Well, you can
that's
even see in their doctrine, right? I mean, a lot of their doctrine that they use against their own civilians is really what they've done in other conflicts elsewhere to other, you know, Muslim communities. So they're literally just kind of doing the same thing. And then they're right, they are paranoid in this because they kind of been, you know, at arms with everyone that's been around them for a long time. But and let's get into that too. You know, one, you know, solution that someone would probably say if they were not me, would be like, okay, well, Israel obviously needs help against Iran. We are definitely enemies of Iran. Why aren't we funding Israel to go and continue to take and fight on Iran for us? You know, for funding them, we can pretty much have a meta war like we're doing in Africa, and that's pretty much what we do everywhere. Well, here's the thing. So, and all the conflicts I've ever seen when it comes to like just, you know, general the history of like, you know, civilization, when it comes to religious conflicts, those, you know, those last a long time. And this specific conflict, like I said, stems from a very long history between, and this is literally just because one group's Muslim and one group's are Jewish, and they'll hate each other until one's dead, and that's it. Or they're both dead. One's dead until they're both dead. That's it. So, you know, maybe there could be some resolution in there, but I have not yet seen it. And it looks like a lot around the other conflicts that have happened within like countries that, you know, there's just completely a mismatch of values, right? It just won't work. So I think that any kind of, funding to this effort is just a sunk cost. And we should really just position Israel in the way that we want them to be a rational, good actor, like I said. But let's just say my whatever I wanted is it's not going to happen. What we should do rationally, just in general, with Israel, is to position them to be able to make a lot of money from Israel. So we've made them into an economic powerhouse, and they are, doing, and they're in a lot of tech industries as well. I mean, even a lot of the defense and weapon systems that are developed in Israel, we even use here. I mean, hell, we got Uzis over here. Those are Israeli weapons. So they definitely have a lot of infrastructure there, and a lot of commerce. And I think that we should kind of position us to be just the general. We are basically the general supplier of like weapons, but just more position is more adversarially, because we give, right, at this point, Israel a lot of money, and that kind of just sets off the the cost of doing commerce with them, how much trade money we get from them. So I would like to look at the relationship of our trade and how much money we made from that, how much money we are giving to Israel, because I would rather have that make and be a positive, right, net positive for us than negative for us, because there's no real reason we should even be getting involved within this conflict other than the fact that they are fighting against our adversaries, Iran. However, it's not a war really we should be investing in. So if we can find a way to make money off this shit, we should, because it doesn't matter to us. And I'm pretty sure no one in America even knows who, the Hezbollahs are, or even like knows anything about the situation, and especially the religious kind of conflict that's been going on there for centuries. So I think that's just definitely an element to it.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely trace a lot of this angst between the Jews and the Muslims, even back to like the time of the Crusades, when the Catholics redistributed the land under, well, there was the Kingdom of Jerusalem for a time, and then there were several others. I think there was even certain crusades where the Catholics fought against both the Jewish and the Muslims. So that was an interesting one, because like, look, if you look at the three major religions right there, the Abrahamic religions, they all lay claim to that area. So it's bound to be a shit show. Catholicism, we kind of don't care anymore about that area. It's mostly just the Jews and the Muslims there.
Is that place considered, where's Zion considered? Like, where is that? Or is that just not like, is that just a biblical area?
It's a synonym for Jerusalem. So
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
so they're basically all just fighting over the values of Zion, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, like it's not uncommon for like someone like me, like I could go take a religious pilgrimage to Israel, because technically, yeah, it's part of my faith too. Going to the wall, going where like Jesus was baptized, you could, this stuff, places where you could go. And I think that that's where I sort of feel some type of way about this situation, is because like you're on holy land, yet there's bloodshed like this. Like this should be, if anything, this is a phenomenal opportunity where you could have everyone be happy-go-lucky in one space, but it's just everyone has their own ways of doing things, and they're not really willing to compromise, which at some degree I understand too, because what may be honorable in one thing will be dishonorable in another thing. So it's a whole convoluted issue. I would say that religions are inherently a good thing. It's not, I don't want to like subscribe to like all religions are bad, because I think I saw some statistic or something that like only 12% of the wars in history were fought like on religious values. Most of it was just for conquest.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point, because I want to say that, religion is not the root cause of why this is happening. It's not because the Muslims all have a death pact that want to go kill, Jews or the vice versa. Okay. So the reason why this kind of conflict happens in the start is that religion is the unifying factor between a lot of the people in these regions. Okay. I mean, look at us. How freaking far away are we from Israel? How big of a role do they play within our government? Right. So, it's more over like a for like Israel and Iran. It's a nationalist sentiment. And when they go look at other states, when they automatically look at, like, imagine they have a reference card, right? And this is just from them being Iran nationally. They have a long history. All of their citizens know their history, or at least a lot of them do. So when they're taking a look at a card of all the people, that have been good to them and all the people that have been bad to them, they're looking, all right, let's look over Israel. No, they haven't. They haven't been very good to us. That's pretty much every single Iranian citizen does. So they're just like, they've been horrible to us for this many years. So I guess they're just an adversary forever. Right. It's not even about religion at this point. It's almost like an assumed like thing. Like they wake up 4-year-old, like a 4-year-old gets told by his mother's like, those guys, they just keep on fucking with us, and it could be from either end. So it's a never ending loop is what I'm trying to say. And it's not going to be broken, or we're not going to break out of it until there's some kind of unifying fact between Iran and Israel. I don't know what that could ever be, honestly. Bob's your uncle on that one. But maybe westernization will just be the end of it. Maybe Iran will get woke and they'll join the liberal mafia that is the Western powers. But
Well, you actually did see, like, in Afghanistan, when everyone left, the cities especially were given a lot of that westernization treatment. So a lot of those people getting a taste of what supposed freedom is supposed to feel like, and then having it taken away within a couple years is kind of a big tease for them. And I think that's really it, is like you have to be able to experience the other cultures or other ways of thinking. And then if you still want to go with what you want, absolutely go for it. And if anything, it can make it more nuanced instead of just like, we do this because this is how it was said, that's where you could sort of mold maybe Western thinking and fitting it into your own culture, which is something that China did many years ago. They took a Western style democracy, right, when the Republic of China was first created, and they made it definitely was not perfect, but they made it in a way where it worked for a time in China. And that was only because it had the culture in mind. So this whole democratization of these Islamic countries, it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But what you could do is just give them it. Well, they need to seek it out. That's the problem. They need to seek it out. And if they seek it out and they find something, they could sort of adapt it to their culture, because there is this stuff that can fit.
So, and one thing to put in general is that the more economic power a nation has, especially when it is concerned to GDP per capita. So, like, if people are making money, is what I'm basically trying to say. Then that helps the population become more liberal in the traditional sense of the word. I'm not saying like liberal as in like American liberal. I'm talking about like freedom and of ideas, for example. So, as the country gets more rich and rich, that will naturally happen. I mean, you even see a horrible pushback when it comes to nations that are very rich now. And they're seeing, people rising up saying, why are you doing this? Why are you committing this atrocity? I mean, like I said before, 86 people just died, mass execution in Saudi Arabia. I wonder why that's happening today. Well, they are oil rich nowadays. So now you have a more liberalized population. So I expect, especially within the coming years, there's going to be more and more of the conflict. Whether it will boil to a head, that's anybody's guess. I would think not, just because, if that were the case, I feel like Russia would have been overthrown for a long time ago. But, there's definitely too many modes of control for anything like that to happen. And it's the same thing in Iran. But Iran's definitely not doing as well as Saudi Arabia is. But they are getting up there. They're definitely going to be facing a lot of economic problems when it comes to later in the development. By economic problems, I think a lot of their land is actually become inhospitable, but that's a topic for another day. I just feel like we crush nations economically as in America. So much so that we are doing ourselves harm because it keeps these nations in this kind of like transition stage between third world and first world, where they are looking to get any kind of leg up, right? And traditionally nations think of land, so they'll just start fighting with different area or different states around them, or trying to just basically just come out of that. And that'll take many faces, as we've seen. A lot of these nations have become nationalistic and are trying to rally behind that. And that's, I'm gonna tell you, that's definitely a trend that keeps on happening when it comes to really troubled states.
I think that the reason why that happens is because they need something to like rally behind. You saw the Germans do it when they were economically shafted after World War One. It gave way to stuff like that, and even with Russia too. There was I actually found out about this guy that's sort of like a philosopher slash politician in Russia. He actually believes that, well, if you want some craziness, this is the craziness, and it actually makes Putin look more like a moderate when you look at this guy. His name escapes me though, but anyway, he founded his own party. Oh, Alexander Dugin, kind of a weird last name for a Russian, but he started like the Eurasian Party in Russia, and he believes that their national identity is closer to Eurasianism than European. So he espouses like all these crazy ideas where he's like, oh yes, like to solve the Ukraine problem, you must ethnically cleanse the Ukrainian identity. And Putin was just like, yeah, no thanks. So um so for all those media sites that say that Russia's conducting a genocide, that's just not true, because he literally said no to the genocide that this guy said. But it's interesting though, because a lot of, especially in the Middle East, you see a lot of nationalism, even in Israel, because when I think that also when you're just in kind of a hot zone in terms of conflict, you kind of have to be nationalistic, otherwise you're gonna run out of like soldiers and stuff.
Well, they're not going to run out of souls in Israel. You don't got a choice.
Yeah.
You're
No,
going to war, buddy. But that definitely makes sense. You're right.
Yeah.
And I think Israel's a unique case. Besides what I'm going to talk about in a little bit, just shortly, in that their national was built because it was a necessity, right? Where they're literally like, imagine you're born in a nation and like, guess what, buddy? Everyone hates us. Everybody around us hates us. We're going to war tomorrow. You ready to defend your country? Like, I'd say a good chance that you'll be pretty nationalist. I mean, if I was told that, I'd be all gung-ho when I was a younger kid. I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going war, baby. I love war. Nowadays, not so much. But one thing I want to say is there's a huge trend when it comes to nations going to a dangerous nationalist level and economics. So whenever countries experiencing like very big pangs and like the regular citizenry is really just not living well, right? You'll see people turning to whatever they can to find solace. So that could be religion, that could be a movement, and that's the problem, the movement part. So, if people have their own aims to do whatever, they'll tell people whatever the hell they want a year. I mean, you obviously see what's happening in Afghanistan. I mean, they've been tried to taken over by two countries for like what, 30, 40 years now. And look what they look like now after being economically crushed from that point on. Look what they are now. They are extremists that like are just like absolutely crazy, like zealots. Like it's pretty nuts. Okay, I'll be honest with you. And you see that. Not, I mean, not that exact type of nationalism, but you've seen that in Nazi Germany after World War One. We kind of fucked them with the Treaty of Versailles, and you don't even see that in Italy when they were going after the Great Depression. They had a huge movement of neo-fascists. So like you'll see neo-fascism come and rise within any country that starts to kind of decline economically. And that specifically happens because there's a vacuum of like real like authoritarianism. So like, for example, like if Russia were in this situation, right? Like they kind of just quell it, like almost like unless they were the majority of the population. Like say if there's a new religion in Russia, right? And like they were all going for it because it's economically trashed. Well, if there's not a strong government to go and fight against that and put measures in place to prevent that, then it's going to take over the country, and that happens a lot of the time. I mean, you've seen that Nazi Germany, Hitler standing on a beer table. You've seen that with the proto-fascists in Italy, taking over an entire city. These movements grow, they turn into something. So with Iran, you see the, Hezbollah terrorists. So let's see where that goes. And let me give you a little hint here. If the Hezbollah terrorist organization takes over Iran and Iran gets nuclear missiles, guess what? You're going to see a nuclear missile strike. I guarantee you, because they're not rational actors. They're literally just like, yeah, no, if I blow up Israel with a nuclear weapon, guess where I'm going, baby? Straight up there, baby. Bye. I don't care. You can bomb Iran after all you like, baby. I'm going to heaven. I got my how many virgins is it? 72? 72
like
virgins,
that.
baby. Woo, go to town. So that's the problem. We can't let this cycle continue to go, because we're going to get an irrational actor that is going to just get a nuclear weapon and kills. So, and that's just my little spiel, is that nationalism leads into fascism, and fascism leads into idiocracy with nuclear weapons.
I also found, just to kind of close, the Hezbollah is a legal political party in Lebanon. So that's interesting. They have 13 seats. They have 13 seats in the parliament. So that's score one for the extremists.
They're getting organized, baby. Here comes step 2.
I think that's actually sort of a bit more of a scary thing when you see like an organized group like that, and especially if they have if they're a legal political party. Like that's actually pretty crazy, because like the Nazi party, like they won in their elections and everything. It's not like originally, yes, they tried through force.
It'd be like if the Nazi parties were a bunch of people that fought in World War One, and a group of people that like all the citizens are like, keep on going, baby, you go, you do it, baby, come on, Hezbollah. It's all Iranian citizens. I'm not gonna say that, because maybe some good guys there, but that's the type of vibe I'm getting, and it's definitely a dangerous vibe, because guess what? If they take over, it's not too good at all. But I would definitely say in this situation, right, there's a lot to be taken from this. America could do some good sanctions. Like I said, I think that's the best way to use sanctions. But we also have to realize what Hezbollah is and what kind of nationalism they represent and could bring up.
Alrighty, we'll close in on that. The Middle East, as exciting as ever. Whenever you're starving for content, there's always you can always go there. There's always something new happening every day. And as always, we thank you for tuning in. Danny, thanks for coming. Sean, I hope you're picking out wonderful groceries right now. Oh, there he is. He's waving. He's waving hello.
I just
But
finished my shopping trip.
we love
Very
that.
informative, Danny and Christian. Thank you.
No problem.
So we wish you a good week, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. See ya.